In the military world, legends rarely begin with triumph. Most begin with doubt. And the story of the F-22 Raptor, the most advanced air dominance fighter ever created, began in exactly that atmosphere. Not with applause, not with admiration, but with skepticism. It was the early 2000s, and NATO air forces across Europe were quietly questioning whether the United States had exaggerated the capabilities of its new stealth fighter. The Cold War was long over, budgets were shrinking, and many believed that an aircraft as expensive and complex as the F-22 was unnecessary in the new era. It looked impressive on paper, yes, but every aircraft looks unbeatable in brochures. Many military planners and aviation officers across the alliance privately suspected that the Raptor was a product of American hype. A machine the Pentagon had oversold a fighter, too delicate, too sensitive, too technologically dependent to survive in the chaotic reality of modern warfare. Some officers even joked during briefings that the F-22 might disappear the moment it faced real opposition, not because of stealth, but because it would break down before takeoff. They did not know how wrong they were. They did not understand that the United States had built something far beyond the limits of conventional aviation. They had not yet seen what a true fifth-generation fighter could do. That unveiling would come soon enough. Every year, NATO and its partners hold massive multinational air combat exercises to test readiness, tactics, and teamwork. But one exercise stood above all the rest. Red Flag. Conducted over the vast deserts of Nevada, Red Flag was the closest thing to real war the world had ever engineered without firing live missiles. Aircraft from across Europe, Asia, and North America flew into Nellis Air Force Base to simulate massive air battles involving dozens of jets, electronic warfare platforms, bombers, tankers, and command centers, and it was designed to push pilots to the edge of their capabilities. It was designed to show weaknesses. It was designed to expose fear. And that was exactly where the F-22 would reveal itself. The Raptor entered one of these early exercises with almost no combat reputation and a mountain of expectations. American commanders listened politely to NATO officers who doubted its durability, who believed the F-15 was still the true king of the sky, who said stealth was overrated, who whispered that maneuverability didn't matter in the age of missiles. The Americans simply smiled. They knew something the rest of the world did not fully understand. The F-22 was not just a new aircraft, it was a new dimension. When the exercise began, the sky filled with fourth-generation fighters, Typhoons, Tornadoes, F-16s, F-18s, Mirages. They climbed, turned, accelerated, and prepared for coordinated strikes just as they had done for decades. Everything was familiar. Everything behaved the way physics had always dictated. Everything except one thing. The F-22 did not take off as part of the formation. It rose silently into the early morning air, alone and unseen. Climbing so high and so fast that many of the pilots already airborne did not even realize the Raptor was participating in that first mission. It accelerated beyond operational altitudes, vanished into the blue desert sky, and disappeared from radar. Completely. NATO controllers watched their screens in confusion. Even experienced radar operators, trained to track stealth aircraft, could not find the Raptor. One controller asked quietly whether the aircraft had aborted the mission. Another asked if it had suffered a malfunction. The American officers simply told them to continue the exercise. At that moment, the first wave of simulated enemy aircraft began moving into attack formation. The NATO fighters turned to intercept. Standard doctrine, standard engagement. Everything was normal. Then something happened that the Alliance would never forget. One by one, without warning, enemy aircraft began dying on the screens. Simulated missile kills started appearing instantly. No one saw the launches. No one saw the attacker. Pilots who were shot down reported hearing nothing, seeing nothing, detecting nothing before their aircraft registered kill notifications. Some thought their systems had malfunctioned. Others believed the rules of engagement had been changed without warning. None realized yet that the F-22 was already inside the fight. At 40,000 feet, invisible to radar and cruising at speeds no fourth-generation fighter could match. The Raptor was watching every aircraft in the battle space, like a predator observing prey below. Its sensors swept the sky in complete silence. It saw every fighter, every direction, every movement. It knew what the enemy was doing before the enemy themselves did. From that invisible perch, the F-22 controlled the entire battle. It dictated who lived, who died, who maneuvered, who tried to escape. The Raptor was not flying in the same fight as the others. It was flying above it, outside it, beyond it. Pilots on the NATO side were stunned when the exercise controllers announced kill counts after the first engagement. The F-22 had just destroyed an entire strike package by itself. It had eliminated advanced fighters without being detected even once. Its pilot had never needed to come within visual range. Some NATO commanders refused to believe the results. Surely the scoring system was incorrect. Surely the engagement parameters were flawed. Surely there had been a mistake. The Americans said nothing. They simply reset the simulation. And then it happened again, and again, and again. The F-22 vanished from radar at the start of every mission and reappeared only when the exercise was finished. Pilots flying against the Raptor said it felt like being stalked by a ghost. They knew something was out there. They knew something was hunting them, but they could not see it, could not hear it, could not react to it. Every tactic they had learned, every maneuver they trusted, every strategy they believed in failed instantly. They were not just defeated, they were dismantled. After several days of humiliation, NATO commanders requested a full analysis. They needed to know how one aircraft could annihilate entire formations without being touched. The explanation was brutally simple. The Raptor did not fight where others fought. It did not appear where others appeared. It did not engage where others engaged. It existed in its own space, long before fourth-generation fighters even realized a battle had started. It fused radar, infrared tracking, electronic warfare, and situational awareness into a single unified battlefield image that no other aircraft in the world could match. To the Raptor, every fighter below looked slow, blind, predictable. The Americans finally revealed the truth bluntly. The fourth-generation world was over. The F-22 had ended it before anyone realized a transition had even begun. Pilots across NATO walked away from the exercise, shaken. Many had trained their entire lives to dominate the sky. Many flew the best fighters their nations had ever produced. But in the presence of the F-22, they felt something terrifyingly unfamiliar. They felt obsolete. And the moment that lesson crystallized forever came during the final phase of the exercise, when the Raptor was assigned a mission to penetrate deep into hostile airspace, simulated by some of the most advanced air defense systems in NATO inventory. The network was dense, overlapping, coordinated. Radar operators watched their screens closely, waiting for any hint of the aircraft. Minutes passed. Nothing. More minutes. Still nothing. Then the American mission commander radioed the controllers with a calm statement that froze the room. Mission complete. Target destroyed. The Raptor had flown into the most heavily defended space NATO could simulate, struck its target and escaped without any sensor detecting it. That was the moment NATO stopped doubting. That was the moment the alliance realized the United States had built something so advanced that even its closest allies could barely comprehend its capabilities. The F-22 had vanished from radar, not because of malfunction, but because it was designed to be the first aircraft in history that could choose when it wished to be seen. And in that silence, that invisibility, that surgical precision, NATO finally understood that air dominance was no longer a competition. It was a reality shaped entirely by one aircraft. The world's first, true, fifth-generation Predator. The shockwaves from the exercise rippled far beyond the Nevada desert. NATO briefings grew unusually quiet whenever the F-22 was mentioned, and officers who had once dismissed the aircraft as an overfunded experiment now reconsidered every assumption they held about air warfare. But as surprising as those early missions were for the international pilots, they were merely the surface of what the Raptor could truly do. The real revelation came not from the destruction it inflicted, but from the intelligence it gathered. While the fourth-generation fighters scrambled to locate targets, the F-22 already knew everything that was happening in the entire battle space. It absorbed radar emissions, infrared signatures, radio traffic, electronic interference, even the faint distortions in the atmosphere created by jet exhaust at long distances. The Raptor understood the sky like a living organism, reading its structure, its flow, its shifting patterns. It was not simply a fighter. It was a sensor field wrapped in titanium and stealth coatings. And every other aircraft, friendly or enemy, was completely exposed under its gaze. Within hours, the American commanders performed a demonstration. They displayed the Raptor's situational awareness feed against those of the other NATO aircraft. Where the others saw scattered contacts and partial formations, the F-22 saw an entire war unfolding in flawless resolution. Every fighter, every bomber, every electronic warfare aircraft, every drone, every surface-to-air battery on the ground. Everything was mapped inside the Raptor-S cockpit with a clarity that stunned even the most experienced aviators. Some pilots stared at the display in disbelief. Others grew quiet, realizing that dogfighting, interception, even basic survival had all changed in ways they had never been trained for. The technological gap between the Raptor and the aircraft around it was not incremental. It was generational. The Raptor wasn't operating one step ahead. It was operating 10 steps ahead, inside a future that the rest of the world had not yet arrived in. But technology alone did not explain its dominance. The truth lay deeper in the way the F-22 fused its stealth with tactics no fourth-generation pilot had ever encountered. Unlike older fighters, which relied on turning engagements into close-range duels, the Raptor dictated every engagement before the enemy ever realized they were being hunted. It appeared at impossible angles, attacked from altitudes where missiles gained terrifying speed, and vanished before aircraft like Typhoons or Rafales could react. Pilots described the sensation of fighting against the Raptor as like being ambushed by the sky itself. And that was no exaggeration. By removing itself from radar and noise, the Raptor made itself indistinguishable from the environment around it. It attacked from invisibility and retreated into silence. As the days passed and the exercise continued, something profound began to shift inside the NATO squadrons. Pilots reported feeling pressure and stress, unlike anything they had experienced in training. Many had entered the exercise confident in their aircraft, proud even. They flew machines that represented the pinnacle of their nation's engineering. Machines they trusted. Machines they believed could stand toe-to-toe with anything in the sky. But by the third day, confidence evaporated. Every pilot in the formation became acutely aware that somewhere above them, maybe 10 miles, maybe 20, maybe directly overhead, the Raptor was watching. They never knew where it was. They never knew when it would strike. They never knew if they would survive even a hypothetical engagement. It was a pressure that turned the sky from a familiar environment into a hostile unknown. The psychological effect spread across the debriefing rooms. Pilots who had once joked about the Raptor AS cost now remained silent when its name was mentioned. Young aviators who had grown up reading about the F-15's undefeated streak now whispered that the F-22 wasn't a fighter at all. It was something else, something beyond classification. Even veteran commanders, hardened by decades of flying, admitted privately that they had never felt so blind in the air. For the first time in their careers, they were trapped inside aircraft that could not protect them. The Americans kept their composure, but they were not arrogant. They understood better than anyone that the Raptor was not simply a technological marvel. It was the culmination of an entire philosophy. In the aftermath of the Vietnam War, the United States had vowed never again to fight a war where air superiority was contested. They had invested decades of research, trillions of dollars, and countless experiments into building a machine that would erase doubt from the sky. A machine that would give American pilots a form of safety no other air force could match. The Raptor was not built for fairness. It was built for certainty. The next major test in the exercise came during a simulated large-scale strike against deeply defended territory. Multiple NATO aircraft were tasked with penetrating a zone protected by advanced SAMs and interceptors. The mission planners loaded the scenario with every threat available: S-300 equivalents, mobile launchers, jamming units, intercept fighters, high-altitude radars. Several NATO officers predicted that the Raptor would struggle. Stealth might help against older radars, they argued, but modern systems could theoretically detect low observable aircraft with the right frequency bands. The Americans simply nodded and said to watch the screens. As the strike began, fourth-generation fighters formed up and began their penetration attempt, weaving defensively to complicate the radar picture. But before they even approached the first engagement envelope, the F-22 had already completed its mission. Without any radar detecting it, without any warning, the Raptor had flown through the densest air defense zone Nato could simulate, destroyed the target, and escaped through an exit corridor that no pilot believed was survivable. When the scenario results were broadcast, dozens of pilots stared at the monitors in stunned silence. Many did not speak for several minutes. The Raptor had once again violated everything they thought they knew about modern war. Rumors began spreading through the base. Some pilots speculated that the Americans had cheated the exercise somehow. Others wondered if the aircraft's systems were being artificially boosted. Still others believed the Raptor had capabilities the US was not admitting publicly. They were closer to the truth than they realized, because the most remarkable fact about the F-22 was not what it displayed in exercises, but what it did not display. Even in the largest air combat simulations in the world, the Raptor was deliberately operating at only a fraction of its classified power. There were entire systems, entire functions, never activated during Red Flag. Some capabilities were so secret that only a handful of pilots, engineers, and commanders even knew they existed. But even limited, even constrained, even holding back, the Raptor was still rewriting the rules of the air. By the end of the second week, the mood among NATO pilots had shifted completely. The skepticism was gone. The doubt had vanished. In its place was something rarely seen between Allied air forces, respect so deep it bordered on fear. Pilots from multiple countries approached the Americans privately, asking how to survive against a Raptor in real combat. Others simply asked to fly near it to observe how it moved. A few admitted quietly that if war ever broke out with a nation possessing advanced fighters, they hoped the United States would be present with its Raptors. For the Americans, this was not bragging rights. It was validation of a promise made decades earlier. The F-22 had been built at a time when the United States believed that the next World War could erupt at any moment. It had been designed to ensure that no American pilot would ever again step into the sky without absolute superiority. And now, in this exercise, in front of NATO and the world, that promise had been fulfilled so completely that even allies struggled to comprehend it. The final day of the exercise sealed the legend. The controllers designed a mission where every aircraft would participate in a massive, swirling, chaotic engagement. Dozens of fighters on each side, with electronic warfare, jamming, strike aircraft and interceptors all mixed together. It would be the largest simulated air battle of the event. Many NATO pilots believed this would force the Raptor into visible action. In such dense combat, stealth might not matter. Close-range maneuvering might be required. The Americans did not argue. They simply took off. The battle unfolded like a hurricane. Fighters converged, split, rejoined, and attacked in every direction. Radio channels overflowed with warnings, kill calls, and emergency brake orders. And through all of it, the Raptor moved like a ghost inside a storm. It eliminated aircraft from angles that seemed physically impossible. It crossed lines of attack without being seen. Pilots who were shot down reported hearing nothing but static before their screens went dark. Some said they felt a presence behind them moments before they died. Others never knew what hit them at all. When the mission ended and the results were posted, the room fell silent. A single F-22 had accounted for the majority of simulated kills in the entire engagement. No aircraft had detected it. No aircraft had threatened it. No aircraft had even seen it. That was the moment the legend became reality. NATO no longer doubted. They no longer questioned. They understood that the Raptor was not just another step in aviation. It was a leap so far ahead that the rest of the world had not yet caught up. A leap that reshaped the meaning of air dominance. A leap that proved one truth beyond denial. The F-22 did not survive the battle. It transcended it. Long after the exercise ended, after the jets were pushed back into their shelters, and the desert winds erased the last echoes of roaring engines, the pilots who had flown against the F-22 carried home something they did not expect to return with. Not humiliation, not resentment, something far more powerful, understanding. Understanding that they had witnessed a turning point in aviation history, a moment that would be studied in military academies long after every aircraft involved had been retired. The Raptor had revealed a truth that Nato had not fully accepted until then. Air superiority was no longer contested through conventional means. The age of dogfighting, radar duels, and brute force tactics had faded. A new era had begun, one defined by invisibility, information, and the ability to shape the battle from a dimension other pilots could not access. The F-22 had not just dominated the sky, it had redefined what the sky was. In the weeks that followed, reports circulated through strategic command centers across Europe. Some were technical, describing how the Raptor's sensors fused battlefield data with unprecedented clarity. Others were blunt evaluations from pilots who had been shot down repeatedly. Many of them had flown for decades and had believed they were untouchable. Now they admitted privately that they had never felt more vulnerable. They had been trained their entire lives to fight visible enemies, to maneuver against threats they could see, predict, and counter. But the F-22 had shown them something else entirely, a threat that erased the idea of symmetry, a threat they could neither detect nor understand, a threat that removed choice from the equation. During one debrief, a senior RAF pilot said something that would later be quoted for years. "You cannot fight what you cannot see. The F-22 fights from another world." His words were neither dramatic nor exaggerated. They were simply the truth. And that truth began shifting discussions behind closed doors in ways no exercise had ever done before. NATO planners realized that their doctrines required rewriting, that their fleets were aging, that the gap between the Raptor and the rest of the alliance was so vast that no incremental upgrade could close it. But the most profound reaction came from the pilots themselves. After the exercise, they gathered at the Officers' Club at Nellis Air Force Base. Normally, such gatherings were loud, brash, and filled with spirited debates about tactics and performance. This night was different. Pilots sat together in quiet groups, replaying the battles in their minds. Some traced imaginary paths across tables with their fingers, trying to understand the angles at which the Raptor had appeared before eliminating them. Others simply stared into their drinks, still struggling to accept how blind they had been in the sky. One French pilot, known for his confidence and his skill in the Mirage 2000, said quietly, "I never saw him. Not once. Not even a shadow." Another, a German Typhoon pilot, added, "I knew I was dead before I even understood where the threat was." And then he said something that captured the mood perfectly. "It is not that we lost. It is that we were never in the fight." The Americans listened respectfully. They understood what their allies were feeling because the Raptor's pilots knew that sensation intimately. They were the only ones who had ever flown the aircraft. They were the only ones who understood the emotional weight of operating a machine that removed doubt from combat. But they also understood that the Raptor was not a trophy. It was a responsibility. And that responsibility carried a burden few outside the United States could fully appreciate. As the days passed, more information leaked into open-source analysis. Aviation experts across the globe dissected radar data, engagement records, and eyewitness accounts. Articles appeared claiming that the Raptor had achieved kill ratios that defied comprehension. Ratios that reached numbers like 40 to 0, 80 to 0, even 100 to 0 in some exercises. No one outside the classified world could confirm the exact figures, but one fact remained consistent across every source. The F-22 had achieved perfect dominance, without being detected, without being threatened, without suffering a simulated loss. Several nations expressed concern, others expressed envy, a few expressed disbelief. But behind the scenes, many governments began quietly asking the same question. What would happen if a future conflict required fighting against someone who possessed aircraft like the Raptor? The implications were terrifying. The entire balance of air combat had shifted overnight. Before the exercise, many NATO nations had resisted investing in fifth-generation fighters, believing the cost too high and the threat environment too outdated. After the exercise, everything changed. Ministers, chiefs of staff, and defense councils across Europe began rethinking their procurement strategies. They realized that the cost of not having such an aircraft could be far greater than the cost of developing or purchasing one. Nations that had opposed the F-35 program suddenly changed their position. Countries that had dismissed stealth now embraced it as the only viable future. The world had seen what air dominance looked like, and they understood now that they had to adapt or be left behind. But the Raptor's impact extended even further. It forced adversaries to reconsider their assumptions as well. Intelligence services in Russia and China studied the exercise intensely. They realized that their own fighters, the Su-27 family, the Su-30, the MiG-29, would struggle not just to defeat the F-22, but even to survive an encounter. The Raptor had demonstrated not only unmatched stealth, but unmatched awareness. It was not just hard to see, it was impossible to deceive. This triggered a new wave of military investment around the world. Inside the United States, the pilots who flew the F-22 understood that the aircraft was more than a machine. It was the physical manifestation of a promise to maintain control of the sky no matter the opponent, no matter the battlefield, no matter the stakes. And that promise was tested during every exercise, every mission, every training sortie. Even when flying against their own allies, Raptor pilots carried the same pressure that had defined the F-15 community for decades. Failure was not an option. They could not be the first kill. They would not be the first kill. What made the responsibility heavier was the knowledge that the F-22 was rare. Only a handful existed. Production had ended early. Budget limitations had killed the program at its peak. Every Raptor pilot knew they were flying something irreplaceable. They were the guardians of a capability that no other nation possessed. And they were expected to wield it with precision, discipline, and absolute professionalism. The moment that truly cemented the Raptor-S legacy in NATO as memory came weeks after the exercise ended, when a group of European commanders returned home to brief their respective governments. Their reports were uncharacteristically solemn. One general from Southern Europe summarized the experience with a single sentence that echoed across multiple ministries. "We did not witness the future of air combat. We witnessed the gap between eras." Another commander from Northern Europe said bluntly, "If a nation possessed 100 of these, no air force on Earth could stop them." A British officer put it even more simply, "This aircraft cannot be fought. It can only be avoided." The United States never gloated. They did not brag. They did not claim superiority openly. They didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. And in the months that followed, NATO quietly recalibrated its air doctrines, rethought its training programs, and accelerated its transition into fifth-generation warfare. Meanwhile, somewhere in the heart of the Nevada desert, the Raptor slept quietly in its shelter. No grand speeches, no dramatic music, just a silent, matte gray predator covered in maintenance tarps, waiting for the next dawn, waiting for the next exercise, waiting for the next time it would rise into the sky and remind the world that air dominance is not a theory. It is a reality enforced by machines built with purpose, flown with discipline, and crafted to stand above every threat the world can imagine. And when that day comes, whether in training or combat, the F-22 will do what it has always done. It will vanish from radar. It will become a whisper in the atmosphere. It will see everything. It will control everything. And when it chooses to strike, the enemy will never know what killed them. Only that something impossible moved through the sky, unseen, untouchable, unstoppable. Because the Raptor was not built to compete. It was built to disappear. And in that disappearance, it became the most feared aircraft in the world.